I'll look it up and then I'll announce the patient.
So do you want us to switch over to, I'm not clear. Do we do anything different,
No,
Rabbi?
don't do anything right now. Okay.
Ricky, your camera's blocked.
Yes, because I'm.
So we will
Okay.
begin
Thank you.
with song and words of Torah. Let me I'll find the page just a second. I'm gonna put it up.
In the Yom Kippur book, it's on page 140.
Oh, I'm in the Rosh Hashanah book.
It's in the Rosh Hashanah book too. In Rosh Hashanah, it's 130 something.
We'll do that.
But just know that the English part of the song is kind of like a free translation of the songwriter. She just kind of took liberties.
Here we go.
You found it in Rosh Hashanah?
Yeah.
What page?
131.
You make it bigger a little?
Yep.
You can do that on your own screen.
אחת שאלתי מאת אדוני, אחת שאלתי אותה אבקש, אחת שאלתי מאת אדוני, אחת שאלתי אותה אבקש, שבתי שבתי בבית אדוני, שבתי שבתי כל ימי חיי, שבתי שבתי בבית אדוני, שבתי שבתי כל ימי חיי, לחזור בנועם אדוני ולבקר בהיכלות, לחזור בנועם אדוני, to gaze upon the beauty of Adonai. One thing, I ask you, Adonai, to be with you all of my life. One thing, I ask you, Adonai, to be with you all of my life.
All right, welcome everybody to our third session of Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Tonight is Tzedakah, our learning to get ready for the High Holy Days. Tzedakah, we usually translate as, often translated as charity. It could mean righteousness, it could mean justice. I want to look at it very broadly in the line from the Natan Tokef prayer as right living, right? The right way to live. And I want to look at, we're going to use the Machzor again as one of our texts to talk about this idea. So I want to look at words you say during the Torah service on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and on the three festivals, the Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. So I'm going to share the screen again. And I'm going to turn to... If you have the book at home, we're on page 228 in the Rosh Hashanah book. It's also in the Yom Kippur book, but I don't know what page it's on there right now. But during the Torah service, on festivals and on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you say these words, just a second, that come from the book of Exodus. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum B'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Rav Chesed Ve'emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Notzer Avon V'Fesha V'Chata'a V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance and wrongdoing, granting pardon. So these are called in Hebrew, these are called the 13 midot, the 13 character traits. But who are they the character traits of?
God.
God. Okay, so where this comes from the Torah, from I think the 34th chapter of Exodus. Wait, it'll say at the bottom probably. Yeah, from Exodus chapter 34, where it is Moses is up on the mountain with God after Moses has destroyed the tablets of the law. He goes up and he begs of God to be able to see God, and God says, you can't see me and live, but you can see my back. But what does that mean? And then it says that God passes by, and then we get these words. Now, they continue on a little bit. It says granting pardon, but then in fact, in the Torah, it says that it doesn't grant pardon to the people who hate God, and it's a little more complicated, but the rabbis wanted to put a period right here for the liturgy. Okay, so what are these midot, these character traits, these virtues? Anybody? Like, use different words to describe these things.
Loving kindness.
Loving kindness, right? So what is that in Hebrew? Chesed.
Chesed.
Chesed is this word that, when they translated the Bible into English, they didn't know how, they couldn't think of one English word, so they had to think of a super English word, loving kindness, which whenever you see it written in English, it's loving and kindness smashed together, right? Okay, but what does chesed mean? It means, I think, an English word that might be better, graciousness, which means you give, it means you're giving without wanting to receive, you're giving wholeheartedly. Okay. What else is God about?
True.
True.
I can't
True.
find it.
Good.
Emet.
So it could mean true. It could mean truth. Like it could be the noun, or it could be the adjective here, right? Emet. So God is about truth, or about being truthful. Okay. Good.
I see it as what you see is what you get. There are no games.
No games. Good. And good. All right.
How about forgiving?
Forgiving, right? So that's very central on Yom Kippur, right? We talked about that 2 weeks ago. Good. Endlessly patient. What's that?
Very, very patient.
Patient, right? So what is it? So I'll ask Rivka, what would Erech Apayim mean? Like it means patient in biblical hero, but what does that mean literally?
Literally,
Yeah.
it means that he forgive.
Right, but it has to do like off is like it might mean so what?
It's like it's a very long,
Yeah,
patient, endless patient.
Right, exactly. Erech means like wide and long, but apayim here means patience. There's other words for patience, but I think it's also a play on the alafim here. It sounds like that, which means the 1,000th generation, but it's also like a af when you talk about af in the Bible, which means your nose, but that means anger because your nose is flaring. So I think it's like the opposite of that you're calm. Good. Anything else? So what does this have to do with what does this have to do with us? I'll ask.
Well, the things we should strive for, these qualities in ourselves to match.
Good. So in Deuteronomy, it says you're to walk in God's ways. And usually that's translated to be taking on God's virtues, right? That God visits the sick. How do we know God visits the sick? Well, in Genesis, right after Abraham circumcised himself, the next story is God comes and visits, right? Mm-hmm. And God comforts the bereaved. And God, how do we know God comforts the bereaved? I'm trying to think, what's that story? I think it's when Sarah dies, I want to say that God comforts, it says that Isaac was comforted, right? And God, right, is patient, is loving, is giving. Okay, and we're meant to live through those virtues too. Good.
What about granting pardon?
Granting pardon, good.
To each other.
Yeah. So God grants pardon on Yom Kippur, or maybe every day if you are contrite. Aren't we called to do that too if someone's contrite?
You have to forgive.
Right. To forgive someone who's actually asking forgiveness and actually showing teshuvah, right? You're not to hold grudges, it says in the Torah, right? And revenge is not, you're not supposed to take revenge, it says in the Torah, right? All right, questions, comments? I like showing mercy to the 1,000th generation also means kind of like God gives you the benefit of the doubt because of who your parents were, right? It's like relationship, right? Why do you love your cousin? Probably just because he's your cousin.
And
right?
family.
Like you just have this relationship with them, right? And so God had a relationship with our ancestors. It's about relationship. It's not about abstractness, right? Okay, so
Rabbi, these things are like God, they're the ideal for God, like all the time, but we are always striving because we could never reach, we can never be that good, but we could try.
We can try.
And Rabbi,
and you can always change, right? Scott, yeah.
Does it ends with granting pardon?
Yeah.
Is that because at the end, the last thing we are supposed to do before we die is grant pardon to everyone we know?
Or we ask
for feds.
No, before we die, we're supposed to ask forgiveness of everyone we know.
Oh.
Right? But hopefully you've granted pardon before that. Right? So good. Let's look at some other texts. This comes from every morning. There's a series of texts that you study when you wake up. So you study Torah the first thing you do when you wake up, right? And they come into Siddurim and people do them liturgically also. And this one, you're supposed to study a text, like it come down and traditionally you study a text from the Torah, you study a text from the Mishnah, which is an early layer of rabbinic laws from 1800 years ago. And then you study a text from the Talmud, which is built on the Mishnah, okay? So this is a very famous Mishnah. And it's teaching you how to live an ethical, how to live a virtuous life, right? So let's look at this. We'll have to unpack it. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shi'ur. These are the things. I'll translate them in a minute. Hape'ah, habikurim, v'ha're'ayon, u'gemilut chasadim, v'talmud Torah. You see what I'm reading at the bottom? So there is no limit to the fulfillment of these mitzvot. These are, so it doesn't say mitzvot, it says things, but okay, it says these actions, that there is no limit, meaning usually it means that you can never do enough of them, right? So you light your candles on Shabbat, you lit your candles, you're done with that mitzvah, right? These ones, there's no like end date, end point, okay? You get that? So what are they? Hape'ah is the mitzvah of leaving the corners of your fields when you're a farmer for the needy. So in the Torah, there's a mitzvah, I think it's a couple places, where when you are a farmer, you cannot harvest the corners of your fields. And they are not owned by you. Who are they owned by? The needy. And in fact, there's no measurement of what that corner is. I think there's only a minimum. There's no maximum measurement of what the corner is. Right? So it's not you giving it to the needy, it's the needy taking what is rightfully theirs. Because it's everybody's responsibility to feed each other, right? Okay. The next one, habikurim, giving to God the first fruits of your harvest. That's what you do at Shavuot. You take this basket of the first parts of your harvest in the early summer. You know, the end of the harvest comes at Sukkot, but the first parts in at Shavuot, you bring it to the temple. But who are you actually giving it to?
Priests.
The priests, right? They didn't own land either. And so you're feeding the priests who serve in the temple, who serve God. So you're giving to God through the priests, okay? Re'ayon is the word it's one of the words for showing up in the temple, but they're translating here, gathering with the community for festivals, okay? What does that have to do? Like these other two are about giving to people who needed food. What does this have to do with that?
Being present.
Right, being present, that's exactly what the word means. Re'ayon has to do with being seen. Yeah. But what else might it mean?
Being part of a community.
The community needs you, right? Whether that's giving, feeding people, or just being there, right? In Jewish law, you can't do certain things without a minyan, right? You can't do certain prayers without a minyan. The community depends on you to be a community. You can't be a Jew by yourself because then you're depriving other Jews of you. Okay? And then Gimilut Chasadim is acting with chesed, with this kindness, this loyalty, this love, right? This graciousness, all tied into that word, right? So what does that mean? What might that mean, acting with chesed? So, anybody?
Well, it's one of the godly qualities because that was in the first one that we did.
Exactly, it's back to that one of those godly qualities. So these other ones, like the corners of your field and the first fruits, those are defined by law. There's, this is what you have to do. Chesed is like all the acts of love that are not defined by laws, right? So, I was a Boy Scout, walking the old lady across the street, right? That's an act of chesed, right? So it's defined by law that you have to give so much tzedakah, right? You have to give so much charity, right? But it's an act of chesed to look at a homeless person in the eye on the street, right? Whether you give or don't give. It's an act of chesed to not just give money to a social service agency, but to deliver the food yourself, It's an act of chesed to so on and so on, okay? And then what's the last one? Talmud Torah, which means learning Torah.
Study. Yeah.
Study, okay? We'll see what that has to do with them. So then,
actually, can I make a comment before you move on?
Please.
So what I find interesting about that if you were to interpret it like in a modern sense,
Mhm.
is that I think people think about charity, not everyone, but when you think about charity, it's something that you do after you meet your own needs.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas tzedakah is not about that.
Mhm. No.
Right? In other words, you are expected to do this in some sense before meeting your own needs. It's not to say that you don't meet your own needs,
Right.
but that like the fact that you're giving the first fruits of your harvest,
Right. Yeah.
right? Which could be the most tender, the most wonderful, the most needed, you're hungry,
Mhm.
whatever.
Well, the most needed, especially after the winter when you
Right.
might have run out of food. Yeah.
And those go first.
Yep. Yep.
And that's not after you take care of yourself, everybody else,
Right.
save for the next year, put, sock it away in the 401k or whatever. It's the first thing that you do.
Right.
And I think that's a really, that's a very significant message.
Thank you. It's tied in with gratitude, right? It's tied in with that, like, especially the first fruits is like, these aren't mine anyways. I'm just giving them back to God because I don't, like the biblical idea, the Torah idea is that you don't own the land. You're just the tenant farmer for God, right? And like with the payah is like, the corners of the field is that these are, and it's not just the corners too, anything that falls to the ground while you're harvesting are also for those are called the gleanings, right? That's also for the needy, right? And if you think about living in the ancient world, if you were a farmer, most of the farmers grew enough to eat, right? And I was just reading something today about making bread in the ancient world. It took every day, it was usually the woman's job to make the flour. It took 2 to 3 hours just to make flour every day, of taking the grain in the stone like basin and pounding it with a rock to make the flour, right? And if you had all of a sudden one year, if you had some kind like locusts or whatever, you could starve to death. So whose job was it to take care of you? It was your neighbor's job, right? And how precarious eating was until, very recently, right? For most of the world, I mean, still for a lot of the world, right? So there's no such thing. There is a such thing as the individual in the Torah, but there's no such thing as like the rugged individual, right? Who can go out on their own, right?
I think I'm struck by, if it's okay to say this, that, and I said this before, Rabbi, but this idea that the text starts with there's no limit to fulfillment of these mitzvot, right?
Mm-hmm. That means you can never end.
Some of them would appear, however, to be limited by the fact that they are specific exercises or things to do, leaving the corners of your field. So the only way that would be limited was if you only have one field and it only has 4 corners, you can only limit that. Okay,
that's the only limit.
By definition, the first harvest, the first fruit of the harvest, is the first fruit of the harvest, and there's no more. So
there was no limit on the size of the basket you could bring.
Okay, I get it.
And every year, right? Yeah.
Right, gathering the community for festivals. Well, there's only so many festivals, so there's a limit to that.
Yeah.
But the two things that are much more, let's just say, open and subjective are acting with kindness and loyalty.
Yeah.
There is no limit, right? Hypothetically, and striving for knowledge of Torah, for which there hypothetically could be no limit, right?
Right. You never get to
stop striving. So it's an interesting mix. I just find it to be a really interesting mix of things that would be self-limited, right?
Right. So you might think that they are, but maybe the principle that underlies them is not. Maybe that's what it's saying, right?
Right.
Principle of giving and taking care of the other is limitless. And these are just the laws of how you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what it's saying.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
So
Rabbi,
I would think it means it's not a one and done situation.
Yeah, I think
In
it
other
also
words,
means that.
every year.
Yeah, every year.
You're supposed to leave the corners of your field.
Right, right,
Every year you're supposed to attend festivals and so on. So
Right.
it's not as though you fulfilled it in a given year and that's it. It's
right.
long.
Every
And
day-
it's also
every
like in the
day
commentaries,
being
it's also, there's no limit on how big you make your corner too, right?
Mhm.
Rabbi,
Yes,
and every
I
day be
love
kind.
wait, Rivka, yeah.
I love this prayer, אלו דברים שאין להם שיעור, because it's a beautiful lesson how to lead your life.
Yeah.
And our Torah is lifestyle.
Yeah.
The mitzvot just teaches us how to care for other people.
Or back as I was saying before, how to walk in God's ways, right?
Yes.
How to imitate
Yep.
God, right? What the fancy Latin is imitatio Dei, how to imitate God, right?
Yep.
So let's keep going. So here's a text from from the Talmud, which is a similar text we read, but it gives other things. But now it says, so in Mishkan Tefillah, it pushes these two texts kind of together, and this Mishkan and HaNefesh separates them a little bit. So here it says, Elu devarim she'adam ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh, ve'hakeren kayemet lo le'olam haba, ve'elu hem. So what does this mean? These are the things that a person eats the fruit of them in the world, in this world, but the principle, Karen Kayemet, you might have heard of that. It's the organization in Israel, the Karen Kayemet. We call it in America the Jewish National Fund, but in Israel it's called Karen Kayemet Yisrael. What is a Karen Kayemet? Is an endowment, right? So in this world, while you do these things, you get to eat you get the reward of the interest, but in the world to come, you get to spend down the endowment. Does that make sense? It's using this business language okay. So some mitzvot sustain us not only in this world but also in the world to come is how they translate it. But it's using this like this banking language. Okay.
Can I say that I add from a thing that the meditation that I did yesterday? She talked about an interpretation for Olam Haba, not just as the world thereafter or whatever it's called,
which
like,
it doesn't usually mean. I think it means
she
time
said that it like, and I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't remember which Hasidic. I don't know if any of you were there today. I don't remember which rabbi she was quoting, but she was talking as Olam Haba as the world to bring forth, like the world, the changed world, the corrected world, the fixed world.
Right, because you will find this in Jewish thought, but most classical, especially in the Talmud here, we don't wait for heaven like we think in Western pop culture. We think of a world perfected, and then all the righteous people will be resurrected to live in that, right? So it's actually this world, just a perfected world. The world to come means this time that we're never there yet, but it's a time of world perfection. That's what it means, kind of. Okay. So what are these things now that we get rewarded from just the interest right now, but in the next world, when the world is all of this, we get the endowment, the full endowment. Kibud av va'em, which is honoring your parents, one of the 10 commandments. Gimilut chasadim, which we heard in the last one, right? Acting with, it says here, kindness and loyalty, but acting with chesed, loving kindness, graciousness. V'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit va'aravit, which is when you get up early to go to the study house, or in the morning and the evening, so before work and after work, you study Torah, right? Hachnasat orchim, which is welcoming guests. Uvikur cholim, visiting the sick. Hachnasat kala is rejoicing with the bride, but that means supporting people in their wedding. Right? Uvayat hamet is burying the dead. Viun tefillah is like having serious prayer. the Hava'at Shalom Bein Adam L'Chavero is making peace between people. The Talmud Torah, and studying Torah again, Kineged Kulam. So this translates it, this is the cornerstone, but Kineged Kulam could mean like studying Torah is like on a scale equal to all of the rest of them. It could mean that. Yeah. I think Gates of Prayer used to translate it in the study of Torah is greater than them all because it leads to them all. It added in that part, but it means like, I think it means it's like just as weighty as the rest of them, right? But I think implied in that is because if you study Torah, you do the rest of them, right? I think it might not mean that. It might not mean that. So what are these things?
I just find it interesting that it's mentioned the world to come, because traditionally in Judaism, we don't refer to heaven.
Right, but I'm saying it's not exactly like heaven, right? It's not exactly what we think of heaven in the Western world. It's a perfected world that all the righteous dead people will get to live in with you. Right?
Correct.
And it's not true that Judaism doesn't talk about that kind of stuff. It's just our American bourgeois Judaism doesn't like to talk about that kind of stuff.
I just need to say that that's, for me, it's an incredibly powerful, I've seen this before, but this is I've never seen it during the time we're living in this pandemic that we're living in the world that we're living in right now, which is in so many ways, and in this year that we've had. And so this speaks to me in a very different way than it ever would have before. And Rabbi, your concept of repairing that world and that emerging from this difficult period that we're living through, and having the forward that when we come out the other side, we'll have an opportunity to repair this world and repair some of the injustices and the discrepancies in healthcare and the racial injustices and everything that we've had thrown so emotionally at us this year is just incredible to me. Right. It's really amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so like one way to think of, back to Gabe's question, which I might have cut you off a little bit, and I'm sorry, because I get very excited about this topic, is part of the idea of being a Jew is living in the world, but knowing the world is not as it should be, right? The world is broken by design, right? And we have an idea of the world to come, which is the world perfected. But we're blessed to live in the world as it is, because that means we can move towards the world as it should be, right? I almost said we're doomed to live in the world as it is, but that's a little bit fatalistic. That means we have no agency, but we do have agency. We don't have control though, right? And I think that's what we've learned, or that's what the pandemic especially puts in our noses and our faces, that we don't have control. There's an invisible thing in the air that will kill you, right? And I won't get political, but we can fight against it, and someday we will conquer the pandemic, God willing. But to think that we have control over the world or over the world as it is foolhardy. But we have a vision of the world as it should be, and that's what gives us hope, right?
And the world is broken, but it's still our obligation and our mission to do what we can, a little bit at a time, in whatever way, everyone individually.
But with humility, because as soon as you have the idea that you say, I can perfect the world, right? That's, Hitler and Stalin said that they could perfect the world, right?
It seems like most of the things that are being recommended are things that we do actively to help others, with two exceptions: eagerly pursuing Jewish learning at all times, and study of the Torah. And I'm sort of surprised that the sort of passive things, Torah study and
Is that passive though?
would
No.
be the cornerstone.
So I'll tell you, Torah study is not passive. We're actively studying Torah right now in community. And I would say, you know, classical Jewish learning is not someone sitting by themselves in a library.
No, it's partnering.
Right. And in fact, like before the printing press, you couldn't do that at all because, you know, you didn't have any books. You had people who memorized things and then, you know, and then you would argue over that. Right. And there might be a couple books.
But
So,
it's not as directly, for instance, visiting the sick.
yes,
You're,
good.
you're providing some real aid or
Mhm.
whatever help
Right.
to somebody else.
Yeah, true.
Maybe if you have a group, that the group as a whole is benefiting by thinking of these issues.
Mhm.
It seems to me that if you don't act upon them,
Mhm.
then you really are not fulfilling.
Correct, correct. Yeah, you can say you're a compassionate person, but if you've never sat with someone in a hospital bed, are you actually a compassionate person, right? It's like you can say you're not a racist person, but have you ever done anything to alleviate racism in America, right? Yeah. So I think action is tied. It has to be tied in with the feelings, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Wait, I think Matt wanted to finish. Yeah.
I just was going to say that it's something like Musar, which we studied together,
Yeah.
or you know, we're involved in together, is a more active,
Yeah.
where you're actually reaching out
Right.
from yourself to someone else.
Right. So it's funny. I mean, and that's, you know, yes, and that is normative Judaism, I would say. And when I was one summer in rabbinical school, we all had to take a chaplaincy course in a hospital, and I was working. I was in a hospital in Vancouver. It was actually a Catholic hospital, and I was the only Jew in the group, and there was a Catholic and all the rest were Protestants, and our teacher was actually a Protestant. And I thought, and we were supposed to do some like, you know, we were supposed to talk about ourselves and do research on different like academic papers about hospital chaplaincy and stuff. And I found this one paper that was talking about how Jewish chaplain, Jews learning to be chaplains had to teach the Christians how Judaism sees things very differently, and it gave these ways of talking about this. But basically, it said, like, it was like a paper for chaplain trainers to understand how Jews think more, and it said like Jews, your Jewish students might be very keen to tell you how many people they visited that day, right? Because we see it as mitzvot that you know, one after another we keep doing it, more mitzvot, right? And being actively doing that is part of you know, walking in God's ways, right? So who sorry, someone else had a comment. Yeah, Mary. Okay.
Where it says caring for the dead and the mourners,
Hmm.
you describe that as burying the dead.
Yeah, that's
That
what it
doesn't
literally
take
means.
into account the mourners.
Sorry, I didn't hear what
That
that.
doesn't take into account the mourners.
Right. So in this list, it doesn't. Visiting
It's
mourners.
included.
Visiting the
included.
mourners is also an important thing, but this means like having a funeral for the dead. This is what this phrase literally means, right? A funeral, another word for a funeral in classical Jewish language is chesed shel emet. It's an act of true chesed. Why is it an act of true chesed? Because it's the only act you could do for someone that you can't get repaid for, right? And like actually in the funeral, the part where you actually bury the person yourself, right? Or the mourners bury the person themselves. That's what's actually called in the funeral, like in the funeral service, called chesed shel emet, right? So you might think that burying the dead, oh, that's someone we could hire a way to do that, or that's something that, oh, who cares what happens to a dead body, right? No, that's also part of living a righteous life, is taking care of someone, even someone who's not alive. No, that doesn't mean just because this list doesn't include comforting the mourner, literally in the Hebrew, that doesn't mean that's not also one of the mitzvot, right? But I think, it's saying that we practice virtue, midot here, right? We practice musar, Matt was saying, even with people who can't repay us, right? Good. Questions, comments?
The comment that I was going to make was these. So we people who are privileged think they have control, but people who aren't know they don't have any control.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Right. But this list of things is actually under your control.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everything else
right.
around you literally can be falling down.
Mm-hmm.
The temple, the world, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these things are completely under your control by your choice.
Good. Yes.
And I, that, and I think a couple of weeks ago I said something about hearing people be in despair.
Mm-hmm.
And if you engage in any of these things, you can't do it and be in despair, right? You can't sit with somebody who's sick and not leave feeling better because you were with that person, right? And I think that universality of that list of mitzvot, at any time, in any circumstances in the world, at any time in your life, you can be able to engage with them if you choose.
Very good.
That's where you have the agency.
Very good. Yes. Yeah, I like that. And we think that we have total free will about everything, but we don't, right? No. We're bounded by our environment, by our genes, by our health, by our socioeconomic status, by all the choices everybody else is making around us. But we do have the choice of goodness, right? Doing these things like Mary was saying, right? And we do have the choice of, like the topics of this class, tzedakah, teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, right? We have those choices.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't mean that we're always successful, right? So we can't be the masters of anything, not even of ourselves, totally. But we can strive to choose goodness, right? Again, back in the Torah, like it says, it's from this week's Torah portion, Nitzavim. I place this choice before you, choose life so that you may live, right? That's what it means. It's choosing to live in a certain way. That's what it's talking about, right?
It's the way that we respond. I mean, there are all kinds of disasters.
Right.
The fires in California, the pandemic, you name it. And they're unfortunate and they're beyond our control, but we can choose our response to those things.
Right. Well,
exactly.
Right. I would say but at the same time, we see how the severity of them are within people's control, right? Sometimes, right? So you can't choose where the lightning strikes, but you can choose how you're treating we as individuals, then we as a society can choose how we treat the environment that makes the severity of things happen. We can't choose where a virus pops up, right? But we do choose the leaders that react to it, right? And so we're in control and we're not in control, right? And it's
tricky.
Yeah, right. And I think it's also kind of saying that, like when it comes to disaster too, I think classical Jewish theology would also kind of say that God's not in total control either, because God gave us this world that's broken, right? By choice, so that we can have choice,
But
Because if God was in total control, we would actually have no choice. We would just be robots, right? Good. Okay, so I'm just checking the time. I wanted to take the last little while and just answer kind of high holiday questions, right? Anything. I mean, it could
Are
be.
you sure? Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah, it could be anything that came up in the last 3 weeks, or anything that it's been on your mind, or something you thought about as a teenager when you were, falling asleep during services, whatever.
I'd like to say I've been looking on that Facebook group about, I think it's mostly rabbis and canners posting questions. And it just seems like this year has been so incredibly overwhelming for our clergy and probably others involved that I hope, at least from this group and hopefully many other, more people, that how much you're appreciated.
Yes.
And I can't believe, I've been on, killer projects, and, the last couple of weeks are really crazy. But for you guys, it must be even worse. So don't worry about the small stuff, and it doesn't have to be perfect.
Thank you.
We love you. And
It won't be.
It won't be perfect. You're right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, it says, then it matches the world. We just said the world isn't perfect. So it's like striving. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you. It's yes, we didn't take video production classes at HUC.
Why not?
Really?
Well, it's also
who knew, as they say, who knew?
Maybe it's just me who's not, like, I'm proficient enough on computers, but people who are only a couple years younger than me are so much more proficient on computers, and then so much more so people 5 years younger than them. It's crazy.
It's
and
like
those of us who are older.
Right. Yeah. I can only imagine. Yeah.
It's not just the technology, though. It's not just the technology. To me, the learning lesson has been about how much gluing has to happen, because the service has a rhythm and it has a flow, and it has familiar segments. Like, we studied the tradition, we know how to put together those rubrics of the worship experience. And then we have to create those rubrics from complete separate pieces that have to come together. And for me, the incredible learning is about how many pieces there are, and how difficult it is to just sit there and sew it all together.
Yep.
And the videographer who has the technology knowledge doesn't know. I was like, oh, wait a second. He doesn't know Avot, Suchrenu, Gevurot, Kedusha. He doesn't know any of these things. So to make the attachment between the technical part and the spiritual part.
Mm-hmm. It's like the teachers of today who are having to invent since last March. Okay, we're going online in 5 days.
Right.
Take what you need and get out of the school, and we'll see you in a few months.
Exactly. So please tell your friends who are not the regular prayers and studiers and shul goers that that don't expect it to be what you always thought it was, right? As I said, I think I said this 2 weeks ago. I don't understand why people come to the high holidays at all, right? If they don't also go to shul at other times. But so
you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I know.
But maybe
it's a social thing.
Yeah, but maybe to that point, Rabbi, your pre-Shabbat messages that you do, which are lovely, is to say, by design, this is not going to be this whatever.
Or invite them to embrace it the way it is.
So if you've ever wanted to experience High Holy Days on your own terms, in your own, unless it's raining, we're in our yard, right? We're having it in our yard. to do it in your own terms and to learn something new and to experience it in a way that you feel comfortable. A lot of people, and this was true of me for a very long time, you know, there's so much pomp and circumstance around the whole thing. It was a very uncomfortable experience for me for years because there were kind of unspoken expectations, and it was I found it very until I could start to appreciate the liturgy, I found it a very uncomfortable experience. Well, here you go. You can sit in your red chair in your orange room if you choose to, and not have to worry about any of that malarkey. And I think that's like a very liberating thing for a lot of people. So
it could be.
It could be, right? And I also understand there's a lot of loneliness too, because people are not with their families, right? So that's
true.
Yeah. So
you can say dress up or not. You can
Right?
give
No, don't. I would say do dress up. Do dress up because
but you can. But you know.
Right. Yes, you don't. Like, I'm not gonna, I can't see into your houses, but right now I can, but not all the time. But I say do dress up because it changes your attitude, right?
Well, I will, but
if you're wearing your pajamas, you're gonna fall asleep. That's what you do in your pajamas. If you're wearing your nice clothes, you're going to be engaged, right?
But I think that wearing nice clothes can also change definition. I think you could repackage everything because I think this is a wonderful holiday to also maybe just dress up in white like they do in Israel. You don't have to wear that uptight suit, but you could wear like something flowy that'll help you just meditate and maybe sit on the floor or I don't know, whatever, not sit on the floor, but whatever's comfortable for you.
Right, but I'm saying not wear your pajamas, right? Because that's changing your attitude about something. Right?
But make it special for yourself.
But put on pants.
And there are traditions that people get together and they have meals together, and many that may not happen. There may be travel involved that can't happen, and there's all these different changes, and so you have to just be as positive as possible. And
so I have a question in that regard. During the planned activities, will there be any opportunities for the congregation to interact with each other?
Yes. So on Rosh Hashanah, and it will be all spelled out tomorrow. On Rosh Hashanah, there'll be like just a purely social get together on Zoom, but there'll also be the shofar service in the parking lot. So you could talk to people, but distance. Then on Yom Kippur, there's going to be 3 learning sessions in the afternoon. I just got them all set up. That Gary Adickman's going to be teaching about the Book of Jonah. Brian Dicker is going to be teaching about kind of what we were talking about tonight, like how to live a life of holiness. From the Torah, from it's the Yom Kippur afternoon reading, and Gail Walk is going to be leading a discussion, or leading what's called it's community organizing, a listening session on what are the issues, local issues that keep us up at night, so that we as a congregation could maybe get involved in those issues. Right?
Are those going to be all at the same time? So you have to choose?
They're going to be. You have to choose. Sorry. Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah. But
it's just because the rest of the day is services. We don't have that much choice because there's Shacharit, there's Torah service, then there's a break where we could do that. And then there's Mincha, Yizkor, Ne'ilah.
We're not a big enough, we don't have enough capacity to have things going on at the same time, at the same time as services. But we could get them recorded so you could see them, right?
That's good.
Yeah, good. Any other, ask me theological questions, practical questions, anything else?
I was wondering, since Joel has left, how do is there someone taking calls?
Yes.
In the temple?
Definitely. We're still working that out, but Kim will be the troubleshooter. Oh, taking calls in general or during the high holidays, you mean?
No, in general.
Oh, yeah.
Sure,
The
the
office staff
office.
is still in. They each are there on specific days, and Stacy actually has been the acting interim director.
She's been
executive director.
sitting in Joe's, she was sitting in Joe's office all day
Yeah.
today.
Yeah,
And if
Linda,
you ever,
I'm there most days helping David and Jenny. I
Yeah.
don't answer the phone.
Yeah.
You don't want me answering the phone anyway.
right? No, but Elaine
A
and
lot
Tim
of
are still
people are-
answering the phones the hours
There's
that
a
they're
lot
in.
of
There's all
people there.
and in off hours, you leave the message and it gets answered. Yeah. But
Okay.
during the days of the high holy days, Kim will be the troubleshooter if people can't log on or something like that.
Okay.
Rabbi, if you were gonna, I'm sorry, Linda, did you?
No, that answers it. Thanks.
Good.
If you were going to, if somebody said to you, I want to experience high holy days, but I don't want to necessarily go for the whole thing,
Mhm.
especially
Right.
given this year,
Yeah.
what part of it would you recommend? This is a person who is Jewish by birth,
Mm-hmm.
a largely atheist and agnostic home.
Mm-hmm.
There's
a lot of God at the high holidays, so I don't know.
There's a lot. No. This person.
Yeah, no,
I'm just saying about their
they
history.
didn't grow up with Jewish practice.
Exactly. So what would you recommend?
Evening services are the shortest.
But not short necessarily being the priority, more about maybe sparking an interest.
Come on Shabbat.
Okay, that don't come up. So you're back to your original message.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay.
But yeah, I would the evening service, like one of the evening services.
Okay.
I would say Kol Nidre because it has, I guess, a little bit more musical variety, perhaps.
Right, but like it's big on sin. Right. I would say Rosh Hashanah over Yom Kippur if someone's never experienced.
That's true.
Okay.
Will we have the harp?
Well,
Cantor?
We're having, as you know, we can't have anybody really in the sanctuary except for us who just spit into a tube yesterday in order to be in the sanctuary tomorrow.
Right.
But I have a very minimal sampling, I would say, of the harp and the percussionist and the horn and the ensemble singers, and we had to record that. So we did record the brook because I feel like it's a cultural staple of our minhag, of our synagogue's minhag, you know. So we will have like a moment with them, and the beautiful thing is that we have the recording, so we can also post it afterwards and play it at our own time whenever we feel like it.
Thank you.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Saturday night, how lengthy will this program be for Sukkot?
Well, I'll start this way, that it's traditional to say slichot like at midnight. We're doing it at 8 o'clock. So, so thank me for that. But
Yeah, thank you.
8 o'clock until midnight then?
Yeah, no, I don't know. We'll probably be 8 to 9:30 or so.
Oh, okay.
All-star cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think Gay, you're on mute if you're trying to talk.
I was saying regarding Shabbat going forward, I know we're starting this week at 7 o'clock. Are we going to stick with that, or we're going to go drive each other crazy?
No, one time. We're sticking with that.
Good.
Yes, we're not going. That was the first decision I made. I didn't quite make the decision about what time, but the first decision I made was we're not changing.
One time.
Yeah, we're going to have one time, right?
Yay.
Not go back and forth every week.
Yeah. Good.
Great.
All right.
Okay, friends. So we will see you. Well, I will say, so for the evening service, the morning service, Rosh Hashanah, we're not going to see you because it's just going to be streamed. But for the Torah service, you have to sign in to Zoom, and we will be able to see you. So I hope to see you all at the Torah service.
Great.
And on Saturday night for Slichot, we're going to do it on Zoom also. So
Good.
we will see you.
Good.
It's on Zoom, but now new features of Zoom is you can have, here, I'll show you.
Breakout room.
Well, we're not gonna do breakout rooms, but you could spotlight different people here. I'm gonna do Matt just because.
Yeah, can you show me how to do that? Because
Right, you just,
You mean before they speak?
no, so now, do you see this, that you see the three of us separated from you all? See?
No.
No.
Oh, you have
No.
to put your.
Oh, on gallery view?
Yeah, put it in gallery view.
It was in gallery.
I am in gallery.
I see everybody in gallery view.
Yeah.
Put it on speaker view.
Put it on speaker view.
On speaker view, I only see you, Mary Fernandez. Now I see me.
Yeah, now I see you.
Whoever's talking is speaking.
Who sees
Right.
the three of us separated?
No.
I do.
No?
I see it.
I don't.
Yeah.
I
so-
don't.
No.
Now I see Don Piermont.
Are you
Well,
on,
if you guys are on iPads.
you're on an
then-
iPad?
Right.
I'm
On
not.
an
I'm on my
iPad.
I'm
computer.
not.
Laptop.
It's because you haven't updated your Zoom.
Oh, there you go. You have to update your Zoom.
You have to update your
How
version.
do you update your Zoom?
Um,
I'm stopping the live stream.